G'day guys, just want to have a look at the Golden Rose today and the lead up form of runners coming into it. Obviously a key lead up to go with the run to the Rose next week. Touch base again after that race, but just want to have a look at some early runs of these horses leading into it. It looks like it's going to be a really solid and competitive race. No real strong opinions formed as yet, but definitely plenty of different angles heading into the race. I'm not sure what the story is of a horse like Super X yesterday that ran and isn't nominated for the race, but its performance yesterday was certainly warrants it being in the race, so it'll be interesting to see what happens with it in particular. A very strong race it comes out of yesterday. It's unlikely that anything out of that race will be contesting the Golden Rose. Morovia obviously ran very well as well, and so did the third horse, Beau Jest, who looks like going to Melbourne. So we'll get straight into it. Starting at the top of the market, just a quick look at the market, I guess, first. So favourites, obviously Minari, Pariah, Kementari are the three sort of dominant favourites. A little bit different prices around the place. Merchant Navy ran yesterday, Chauffeur. A lot of these horses tie in. There's nothing too scary out of the market that I can see. Morovia 33 to 1 looks interesting after yesterday. I'm not sure where it goes, but it possibly could line up go straight into the Golden Rose. Wouldn't be silly. Obviously worth a lot of money, the horse, and winning a race like this would be highly advantageous to them. Probably on the way to something more like a Spring Champion Stakes, but interesting to see which way they go about it. Okay, so we're going through from the top. Minari's obviously favourite currently. We've seen him this time in, so what I'm trying to look for here is 1400 seems to be the key. It's obviously around 3 weeks from yesterday until the race runs, so horses have only got limited time to build their fitness levels to run a 1400 metres out now, which they've only got a certain amount of time to build up to 1400, so you want to make sure that they're fit and ready for that. Minari's already had the one run back over 1100 metres. He'll have another run over 1200 metres next week, and then have the 2 weeks into the Golden Rose. So he'll be third up 1400. He's had the two trials before that, so reasonably fit going into the first up run. He'll go forward here, and then he'll step into the 14. There is still a query on him at 1400 metres, there's no doubt about that. It's just, you see his first prep, he went 11, 11, 12, 12, 12. That's also 14, but three of these runs were on absolute soup tracks, especially the two Randwick runs. Like they say 9, they were about a 14, and impossible to gauge how the horses really handled that. He obviously had a tough trip in the Gold Slipper over 12 on a heavy, and was third before beaten on protest into 4th position. Nearly all of that form's really difficult to work out, but you still have to have a little question mark about whether a horse is going to run 14. So that's what stopped me stepping into him at the $6.50 at the moment. I definitely need to see him run well. I'd rather take $4 or $4.50 or something after watching him win impressively this week than take $6.50 now with a bit of a question mark over that strong 1400. I think he's the best horse. I think this is a really strong lead up. Obviously had things against him this day. Not too many horses in this race that look like contesting the Golden Rose, which is quite interesting. A lot of these kind of would have been heading for it. Siege of Quebec could do. He's another horse we'll talk about later on, but we'll probably actually touch on him now. So the two horses out of this race that look most likely, Parast maybe is another roughie I wanted to talk about. So these were first up. This horse had a 1250 and a 1400 before this, then was 28 days back to 11, so he's a 1400 metre winner already. He now went back to 1100 there. He'll step up to 1200 this week and then go 1400. So he's an interesting horse. Obviously he's out sprinted here by Minari and had conditions in his favour this day, Siege of Quebec, so I'm excited to come out and frank the form a bit. Trekking was a bit unlucky yesterday in Melbourne. So these two runners definitely are capable of measuring up to a Golden Rose. Obviously, Minari looks a different level at this distance. Once you get back out to 14, it may swing things a little bit more in CJ Quebec's favour. You see he's not stopping there, he's just completely out sprinted. So, interesting. The other horse that we're talking about here is Paras, who finished back and wide. I thought he's had absolutely no chance the way he's been ridden his first two runs back, and he's a very rough knockout chance in some races over the next few weeks. Probably aiming a little bit too high. Ideally, if he went back a grade or two, I think he'd be really competitive. But in races of this nature, the Perrys tend to pop up. Once he gets fit and possibly gets up on the speed, he can run a race. Minari definitely looks the horse to beat for me heading into the run to the Rose, and does look the horse to beat in the Golden Rose. It's just a matter of whether he runs that 1400 and if he gets his preferred dry conditions all the way through the preparation as well. He's a serious horse, and he's a nightmare to beat for mine. He's definitely the one to beat. Pariah. So Pariah's in a similar form to Minari. So he's had the two 11s at 12, a 12 on the heavy, out, back, 1 over the 11. I think his win was, Minari's win was far more dominant and had things against him, whereas Pariah had things in his favour here. You see the ride from Shin cuts inside one, ends up on the fence, never goes around a horse. So the horses to highlight here are Taking Aim, who I think's a little bit outclassed going towards the races we're talking about. Chauffeur, Pariah. I think that's probably it. Going towards the big one. I think Speed Street will end up going to Melbourne. I don't think he'll line up. So they're the three. Pariah, Chauffeur, Taking Aim. Jorda's still in the betting. I'm not sure what they'll do with her, whether she heads to this sort of race or not, but she's interesting to at least keep an eye on. So going back. I thought he peaked on his run here. And a couple of horses that were a little bit less suited in this race closed on him late. I'm a little bit concerned about him at 1400, or more than a little bit concerned. I think he's suited this week in the run to the Rose, and I think he'd be very hard to beat, but I do think that others will be better suited and better set up heading into the 1400. He'll be their third up. Minari's had the extra couple of weeks working between the 11 and 1200 to prepare for it. And then we'll step to the 14. I just think he's up against it. When he gets to the 1400 at this level, I'd much rather see him kept to 12. I'd be surprised if that was the case and it's shown next week that he's maybe a little bit weak at the end of 1200, which I don't really expect. I don't even expect the stable to line him up in the Golden Rose, so I'd be a little bit careful. If he does line up, the stable's just too good at their job to not respect the horse and expect it to run a really, have a good crack at the 14, because they'll definitely be trying to build his stallion prospects. And he'll be heading to races he can win at the highest level. So, be interested to see what happens with him. Kementari. A few people have gone off this horse a little bit because of the stablemate's effort yesterday, but I think you need to put into context how big an effort the stablemate's run was yesterday. 1300 metres first up, a really fast time. Really good merit and everything in the race. He sat on the back of the speed. First up, 1300, and battled on quite well. It's just simply fitness that cost him the race, I believe. I think he's definitely to that level, and can't imagine that being bad form in any way, shape or form. Kementari's obviously had the two trials. This is the latest. He was a little bit niggled, but he does look a horse that's, going to need 1400, so whatever he does first up in the Rose over the run to the Rose this week, over 12, he'll better it over the 14. The trial was okay, but really the run that stamped that he's a nice horse was this second up. So he chased a fast tempo, his first run over 1200. He stepped to the 14, where he led early before taking a sit. All these horses around him had nice enough form, but no one really expected him to do what he did here. Shoulders out. One of the more dominant 2-year-old wins of the season. He would have gone on to races in Brisbane and been a dominant favourite there, there's no doubt about that. Showed great turn of foot when he got out, and he was nice and strong through the line at 1400, so there's no query on him at 14. He's just a query of getting ready for the 14 off the back of one run. It'll be interesting to see. I'm sure this has been his target. He'll be ready to go. It's just be interesting to see. So I'd expect him to be good for this Saturday and much better in 2 weeks' time. He's definitely a major player, but I would have, I do prefer probably at least 2 runs into the 1400 metres, preferably for this sort of high pressure 1400 metres that I imagine we're going to see in the Golden Rose itself. Chauffeur came out of that other race. I probably should have looked at it. Got a little query with Chauffeur at 1400 as well. He did get there in the Champagne Stakes, but again, you've got to put a line through that. The 2 runs on the heavy were just terribly against him. His best run to date was the 1200 metre run at the Gold Coast, where he chased a fast tempo and got home well late there. So this is Chauffeur coming down the outside. Sorry, this one here. Chauffeur coming down the outside, chasing home Hootson. Definitely slowing up here, and he's a little bit flattered by the pace, but you can see that he's quite strong there over the 12. He was strong to the line over the 11 first up behind Pariah, arguably stronger than Pariah on the line. Just a matter of whether he runs 14 as well. So he'll probably go 11, 12, 14, exactly the same as Pariah. 50-50 for mine whether he runs the trip, and I think $11 is pretty short for him. Melbourne horse thrown into the Merchant Navy after a win first up yesterday. Interesting horse. First preparation went 1200, 38 days, 34 days between runs, 1400. So obviously looks like a type that's going to appreciate 1400. Then went another 20 days between runs, 1400 again. He's back on the fence here, near enough to last. Last at the moment. Moves into the race at the ideal time. Just having a look, sorry. So this is a slow pace. And he's got a nice turn of foot, and he can sustain it quite well. Puts those horses away quite comfortably. Then resumed yesterday. There were a few things that looked like it was hard to lead here yesterday. And he's again out the back. This is his biggest issue, I think, going up to this sort of level. His horse's run yesterday was an enormous booker. It's faced the breeze on a day that it was hard to even lead and win, so for it to sit 3 wide, no cover off that sort of chasing speed, it's even more difficult, you would imagine. Merchant Navy waits for them to pack up and then circles them when they're all bunched. Good effort first up, there's no doubt about that, but I do think that plenty was in his favour here. I do think it's a huge step up to Sydney grade. You see trekking back on the inside there was a little bit unlucky. Ran up the backside of the leader, the tiring leader, and lost a bit of momentum. Was definitely in a tougher spot than the winner. This horse sat 3 wide, no cover, and battled on really well, whereas the winners just had the cold sit, had the pattern in its favour. Come with one run where they're bunched and put them away. Don't want to be too negative against the horse, but I find it difficult to come into it. I think that it's aggressively priced as well, around the $10 mark. I'd expect it to start probably double that come race day, depending on who accepts, of course. Next horse to look at is Invader. Another horse that approaches this from a different angle, definitely proven at 1400 metres beyond, obviously a winner over the 1400 in the size Produce, then went to the 1600 and ran second only to the Mission on a day that suited the Mission, and not the best of rides from Huey on that occasion. Came back over the 1200 metres against the older horses on a day that was nearly impossible to make up ground. He gets dragged out of it a little bit, comes back with Spectroscope and Ome Sword, who were the two dominant favourites in the race, and basically finishes with them, so it's hard to knock his effort. You can see him here. This is him here down the outside. He's fairly strong late. I assume he goes this week and then 2 weeks into the race as well. He to me looks a horse that could possibly be looking for further than 1400 metres and could easily get out sprinted in a race. So I'm not sold on him either. And it wasn't until he got to 1400 that he looked a top class horse last time in, even though he was a winner over 12 early in his prep. So interesting how he goes over the 1200 again this week. I assume they'll go there. I doubt they'll go to the 15 and back to the 14 with him, but it will be interesting to see. I think he'd be better suited at the 15. Sorry, just watching a race at Moree there at the same time with the leader sort of shot away and the jockey set up, and I don't know whether he's got run down or not. Anyhow, going back to the more important. So Invader's a horse that, to me, that I think we'll have to wait and see with one more run. I just think I'm worried that he's a bit dour for a sharp 1400 metre Group 1, that he may be better suited over a little bit further on the good tracks. He was obviously a winner over 1400 metres at high level on a heavy track, but a few of those may have caught up to him, and I think he probably needs those sort of conditions again to be competitive. Addictive Nature. So Addictive Nature, just looking at his preparation first up. He's in his first prep, he's gone 11, 12, 14, and now goes to the 15 this week, and they'll make a decision whether he comes back to the 14 or he probably goes up in distance. I'm sure they're favouring a Golden Rose run, but it is a long preparation for him, and he does have a super grounding, so it'll be interesting to see what happens. The good thing about this horse, Addictive Nature, is he's got good speed, which we'll see here. He's able to control his own destiny a bit if he needs to. A few of the horses we've looked at already are probably dependent on tempo and luck in running, whereas this horse has the ability to make his own luck. The problem he does have is he's quite green. You'll see he's over racing here. Another horse to look at in this race is Assimilate, who's out the back. The pace was only slightly fast, but still was a good pressure. You see that Runaway's putting it to the leader nice and early. He kicks away here and Assimilate's coming down the outside. I've got an issue as well with him with his high head carriage. It's a bit of an issue. I don't seem to really see too many really good horses, only since, not for the last 15 years has a really good horse carried his head that high. But he is obviously a very nice horse. I'm worried that he just peaks on his run late there when he dead set looks the winner, and if you see through the line, he's definitely not running through the line Assimilate. He's had enough on the line, whereas the winner's continuing on and looks a lot stronger to my eye, and I think 1400 metres is going to be fine for him. I think a fast run, strong 14 may just top Assimilate out, and he may have some issues going forward. That horse has got beat at Moree. I feel very sorry for Josh Adams right now. Going back to these horses, Addictive Nature and Assimilate are very similar, except that Assimilate's already had the preparation before. Why is it not? Sorry, I might have gone over here. Simulate's in its first preparation as well. So very similar horses, 12, 12, 14. Now going to step up. I assume a Simulate will go to the Stan Fox this week and then back to the 1400 metres if it's to go to the Golden Rose. So it'll be on the same path as Addictive Nature. I think that's the ideal preparation for a Simulate, because that 1500 will toughen him to run a strong 14 and give him his best chance. I think 20 to 1 a Simulate looks fair enough price in the Golden Rose at the moment, and Addictive Nature's $13, probably about his right price. You'll learn more about him this week, and I don't think he's anywhere near a certainty to line up in the race either. Deep into his first preparation, I'd rather wait and see with him. I find it hard to believe that he'll win by 6 in the Stan Fox and shorten right up. I think you'll be able to wait with him and get a good guide. Whereas a Simulate could definitely shorten up into around the 10 to 1 mark without any troubles. Have a look at the fillies now, and this little horse is just a little gem. She's been certainly beaten for mine at 2 runs back. First up, I thought she should have taken the trail in behind here when she had the chance to go straight behind Formality. First up at the 1200 was a bit of a risk for her. She sat wide and further back and took off way too early, and she still had the audacity to really charge at the line. Formality was tough as well, and the slow tempo probably wasn't exactly to her liking, and a good effort. And then we saw them yesterday, another really slow tempo where Formality's controlled the tempo from outside the lead, which is her, she had the barrier draw. I think Champagne Couples can do the same, just victim of circumstance yesterday, forced back to the tail again, comes widest. Nothing Ty could really do unless he pushed forward and had a crack for an outside leader position, and then or just sat out there 3 wide, which probably was the preferred option, but still can't really knock him for at least making a decision. And the way she just continues to run through the lines, great to see. I'm excited, no slouch, and the winner did have its chance there, but was outside the leader and not exactly weak on the line, so she can go to, I don't really want to be on, what else am I looking at here? I don't really want to be on Formality at the trip against the Colts, but I could definitely see Champagne Cuddles running a huge race, and I think 20 to 1 it seems a good price. It's just all about whether she goes there. 3 weeks obviously to the 1400 metres is going to be interesting to see how they handle it. I don't think it was an original target for her, but the way she's going obviously looks like it's a realistic target. A little bit of a concern that these 2 slow-paced 1200s may be flattering her ability to run 14, but she does look the most pace-effective runner in a slow tempo in both runs, and can easily step up to 14 and run it without surprising. It's just not a complete tick as yet. Who else is left? Gold Standard's probably a horse, and Dracaries is another form line I have to look at. I believe Gold Standard's going to the Stan Fox 1500 metres this week, and I would assume that Dracaries has a big chance of doing the same before dropping back to the 14. It gives them a better sort of grounding to have the option. See that Gold Standard missed the start a bit here from the inside. Probably looked like taking a far more forward position, but ended up midfield. Dracaries is outside it. You see Gold Standard over racing here and having to pull out early. See that Adkins on Dracaries is dictated to here, but these 2 horses are still really dominant late. There were things against a few of the other key runners in the race, but still I thought these 2 ran quite dominant races compared to the rest. Here's Dracaris, and Gold Standard's definitely not weak. You can see it, just wanting to find the line, both of them. Dracaris has had the prep before with the 1,200 metre run. It's going to go 12, 13, 15, back to 14. I think it's going to be ideally prepped for the race. I don't know if I'm sure that the 2 horses have both got the class, but I think they're definitely worthy of positions in the race and definitely going to be strong at 1,400 metres. So they both look like they can run races, and they may need a little bit of poor fortune to a couple of the more classier types, but definitely into the race up to their eyeballs. And the only other horse to really look at, I believe, is Shogun's Son, which is the horse that beat Addictive Nature and then ended up back in Brisbane. In the Gold Coast last start. Fast tempo there, back to the 1100 metres, wasn't ideal. The winner looked to go like an absolute rocket. Time was good. When it won in Sydney, it was obviously had the run under its belt compared to a few here. Had got that run behind with the protection of the wind. Got the split at the right time, was quite dominant. There is a concern that the only real horse to come out of this race and do anything so far is Addictive Nature, and he looked like he had a lot against him there. The third horse there, Solar Patch has gone back to town, but it was off a quickish back up from this and ran okay behind Super X, which does look good form now as well. So it's not as if it's terrible form really, like the one's come out and won and the others placed in a strong race. The winner's come out and placed behind a horse that looked to go exceptionally well. So can't really pen the horse. It does look like 1400 will suit it. I'm sure it has a run this week somewhere and then comes into the 1400 off the back of that. It hasn't ticked the 1400 metre box yet. So 25 to 1 looks fair enough for it. Definitely, I can't knock it, but I don't want to be with it. Just looking over the bed, there's another horse there, Jukebox. I'm not sure where it goes. If it's lining up in this race, I just had a quick look at it and assumed that it might be a bit shorter in the market if it was going here. It's only had an 11 and a 12, an 1100 metre run. I'm sure it lines up somewhere this week. Its win was okay the other day, but be very careful. It was a very average race, and I'm a little bit concerned about the form from that, as well as Tulip, who ran it down there first up as well. I don't really expect it to come up for this race, so there's quite a number of chances. I think Minari's deserving of being favourite, as we've seen it, and the only box it has to tick's 1400. Kementari's deserving of being right up there. It's won over 1400 impressively. I want to see Pariah again. I don't want to back Merchant Navy. I want to see Chauffeur again. I think Invader will get out sprinted. Addictive Nature's around his right price, $13. Champagne Cuddles needs to be confirmed that it's going there and whether it's going to have another run before or not. But she's definitely got the ability to be in the race and be in the finish. Formality's solid, but not one I want to be with. Jordan, I can't see it getting to 1400 metres in 3 runs. Assimilate's a horse I can definitely entertain at $21. He looks to be decent value. Interesting to see which way he goes this week, to the 15 or the 12. Trapeze Artist is in the market there. I'm not sure whether it even targets this race. I'm sure it goes 1500 this week and they make a decision. Siege Quebec definitely looks like it's targeting the race and is an honest, tough horse. 25 to 1 seems fair enough for it, for a horse that you know is going to be tough. Gold Standard 25 to 1 seems fair enough as well, and Drakkar is 25 to 1. So I think they're well priced. I think they're solid chances. They're going to have a solid setup that I like. I prefer the horses that are going to go 1500 back to 14 than the ones that are going 11, 12, 14, especially in a high pressure race. I think they're more chance of being tougher at the end of that, even though it is probably going to be won by a pretty dynamic horse. It's a Group 1 deep, tough race. So that's a quick look at it. I think there's a little bit of value around, but nothing I really want to step into. Probably Assimilate 20 to 1 plus seems the best play, but I'm pretty quite keen on Minari and hoping that he'll confirm my theory that he's the best 3-year-old around this week, and just fingers crossed for dry surface, and if he runs that 1400, look out. Hopefully, we'll touch base next week again and check in to make sure that everything's going to plan, and after the run to the roads everything will be much clearer, and the Stan Fox obviously, which is going to be a keen lead up as well. Thanks guys.